I would like to bring on a guest that I am very happy to have a conversation with. I'm joined with Colonel, well, I was about to say professor, but Colonel Lawrence Wilkerson. He is distinguished visiting professor at the government and public policy at the College of William and Mary in Williamsburg, Virginia. He also taught for 6 years at the University Honors Program at George Washington University in Washington, D.C. He is also, and probably best known as retired United States Army Colonel and former Chief of Staff for United States Secretary of State Colin Powell. How you doing this morning? You doing okay?
I'm doing okay. I'm retired from William and Mary, so you can drop that.
I need to drop that. Okay, retired from William and Mary. I'm going to remove that.
Just so I don't get a call from them after this
afternoon. Fair enough. I will remove that from the bio. But thank you for joining me, though. I really do appreciate it.
Good to be with you.
There are two main points, or two main stories that I want to hit. One has to do with, both have to do with the presidency and what goes on behind the scenes. One has to do with a story coming out from Israel, I think it's Channel 13 News, going after and talking about Joe Biden and what Joe Biden effectively allowed, what Israel was even shocked by themselves at what Joe Biden was allowing. And the other one has to do with the deal that Donald Trump came up with that he's calling a peace plan that I cannot tell whether or not he's being serious about it being a peace plan. He said it's his final offer. Neither side is going to accept it. And I can't tell if he's putting that plan out with the idea of entirely to walk. Basically, I'm done with this. I need to show that I actively tried to bring the sides together. Europe hates it. Zelensky can't sign it because they put a bullet in him. And Russia is not accepting terms from the loser in the conflict, in which case they're putting out their own terms. So I'm skating and I'm going to China because I want to pivot to the Pacific. I cannot tell what he's doing if he's serious about this being his plan. But let's step into the first one, the Israel one. They point out in this article that Israel itself was shocked that Joe Biden at no point really pushed back on him. They said, thank God Joe Biden was president during this time. Because, basically they would not have been able to get and go for a year if it wasn't for Joe Biden being as weak as he was in the presidency. What goes on internally in the presidency when something like that is taking place and Israel is expecting the assistance of the United States? Like, certainly the president has power. I mean, even in that article, they point out that the president had power. He could have, I'm not giving you weapons. They even talked about Joe Biden potentially giving a speech, but backed away from giving the speech at the last minute. He didn't necessarily want to do it. Even when he was going to do the 2,000-pound bombs, he did it. Netanyahu humiliated him after he did it. And yet Joe Biden continued to assist all the way through. What are the strings and entanglements in a presidency that causes a president to behave that way? Is it just his ideology, or is there something else going on that I'm unaware of?
I think there are quite a few things going on with the Biden administration. And this article, probably at least 80% or better accurate, my guess, delineates some of them that are more venal, perfidious, and evil even. But that was Joe Biden. You've got a lot of things taking place here. You've got a president who at that time and throughout this period probably was looking at being reelected. And no one knew better than Joe Biden that the reason Bill Clinton beat George H.W. Bush earlier and pushed a really good president with a tremendously accomplished decision-making team out of the White House, including Colin Powell, including Jim Baker, including Ben Scrokoff, and a host of other really good decision makers, the best team we've had since World War II, other than perhaps Eisenhower's team. They pushed them out because of AIPAC, because of the Israel lobby. That's how Bill Clinton won. There were other factors too. Of course, there was the read my lips, no new taxes, and then Bush implemented new taxes. But that wasn't enough. And then there was the Texan who ran and took a little bit of the vote. That wasn't enough either. What really did it was Israel's anger at H.W. Bush being the last president of the United States to actually force them to do something. He forced them into the Oslo Accord negotiations post the first Iraq war because he had gained real, if you will, leverage with them during that war. I won't talk about that because a lot of that is still classified, but he gained some significant leverage on then Tel Aviv, and he used it. And they paid him back majorly. They got Bill Clinton elected, probably one of the worst presidents America's ever had, and certainly in the post-World War II era. He of the beginning of the expansion of NATO, he of the war in the Balkans, and so forth. We forget about all the crimes of Bill Clinton. They went well beyond Monica Lewinsky and the scandal that developed around her. So that's one reason. Biden knew he coveted a second term. He lusted for a second term, and he knew he would never get it if he brought the hammer down on Israel in any significant way. And then you've got to look at the team. As I just mentioned, the team of Scowcroft, Cheney, Bush, Powell. And Cheney was a different individual at that time. He had adult supervision. He had H.W. Bush on top of him and Colin Powell under him. So he couldn't get out of the lock they had on him. And Jim Baker had a lock on him too as Secretary of State, which is rare for a Secretary of State over a Secretary of Defense. But that was condoned by H.W. Bush. He knew how powerful Jim Baker was as a friend, a confidant, and as a diplomat. So we had a great team. Biden didn't have a great team. He had Blinken and Sullivan, both Israelites, both members of Israel. Tony Blinken was the Secretary of State for Israel for all intents and purposes. So you had a triumvirate of people who wanted everything Netanyahu wanted and more. Those two factors, wanting to get reelected and knowing AIPAC was essential to that, and the fact he had this team which was driving him, Blinken and Sullivan, and you could call some other people into that too, even Lloyd Austin at the Pentagon, who was very, very favorable towards Israel. You can't escape that. You can't escape yourself in the question of the political outlook for a second term. And Biden, we saw how hard it was to get Biden to step down. And part of the reason was this lust for a second term. You don't understand how that impacts presidents. They truly feel like, even though their second terms historically are far worse than their first terms, they get much less accomplished in the second term than the first term. They feel like they're not truly complete until they have 8 years. They feel like they've been rejected by the American people if they don't have 8 years. Even H.W. Bush sort of felt a little of that, and certainly Jimmy Carter did. So one-term presidents go away sulking majorly. And that just tells you what it's like. You want that second term. You don't care if it's going to be ineffectual. You want that second term. That's a blessing on your first term if you get a second term. So it's a powerful motivation to do things that aren't necessarily good for the country.
Wow, that article is damning.
Yes,
because he continuously goes out to the public. I'm doing everything I can. I'm trying my best. I'm working tirelessly in order to ensure they get food, they get resources, and even lying about the State Department. Like, you had people who quit because Joe Biden was trying to silence them from putting out documentation.
Well, he was breaking the law. They knew. Yeah. They knew he was breaking the law. Josh Paul left for the same reason, you may recall. They knew he was breaking the law, but they've got home mortgages, they've got children, they got families, and they can't be all that courageous. But a few of them were, and they refused to go on breaking the law. Biden was breaking the United States domestic law when he sent these weapons to Israel. And Congress knew it, and Congress is in the hands of AIPAC too, the Jewish lobby. So they went right along with it. This is a crime of dual parts of the government, a crime of the legislature and a crime of the executive.
How did they get this level of clout? Earlier, before you got here, I played a video from Richard Nixon where Richard Nixon was talking about basically the Jewish lobby.
Right.
And he was very clear. He says, look, there are times where there's a difference between what is an interest of America and what is an interest of Israel. He says, I understand that what happened in the Holocaust, they want to make sure that Israel is intact. I don't have an issue with that. But the job of a president is to be different. That is not the way presidents function today, though.
Every president, all the way up to H.W. Bush, as I said, in some way or form, very openly or in many times covertly, brought the hammer down on Israel when they got to the point where they were impacting negatively American interests. They brought the hammer down. Ronald Reagan brought the hammer down majorly when he sold AWACS and F-15s to Saudi Arabia over the vehement objections of Israel. Others have done similar things until William Jefferson Clinton. And what Clinton did was even more, in my view, maligned than some of the things that happened after him with Obama and my President Bush and others, Trump included, and Biden. What Clinton did was act like he was for the Middle East peace process. He and Madeleine Albright, who was out of her element the whole time, the real person was Dennis Ross. Dennis Ross was working for Israel. But Bill Clinton knew Dennis Ross was working for Israel. Dennis Ross has always worked for Israel. He's a spy in the midst of the middle of our most intimate discussions about the Middle East. Bill Clinton acted as if he and Yasser Arafat, his counterpart, if you will, and Madeleine Albright and others in the business of the Middle East peace process, the roadmap, the two-state solution and so forth, was going to be brought to fruition. He was picking up where Carter had left off. Carter had achieved a peace treaty with Israel's most formidable enemy, Egypt, and Carter had that famous handshake with the two leaders, and he was going to pick up where Carter left off. Well, it was all duplicity. He was working with Ehud Barak, then the prime minister of Israel, to make it very public that he was doing this to gain all the support he wanted from the other wing of the Democratic Party, that wing that now is decrying the genocide in Gaza, led by Bernie Sanders. And that wing of the Democratic Party that shows a little bit of the old Democratic Party, the progressive liberal nature of the Democratic Party. Bill Clinton was appealing to those people because he needed both sides. He knew that for his second term. So he's going through this process all to fool Arafat, the Arabs, and to turn it on them at the end, which he does very cleverly. Israel has its entire propaganda campaign, which is phenomenal, all ready to go. They're probably the best propagandists in the world. They lie through their teeth with impunity and with, looking like they're God's own disciple as they lie. Just as they're lying right now about half the things that are going on in Gaza. And what they did was they blamed the failure of those negotiations on Arafat and the Arabs. And Arafat, the Arabs, walked away from it like, we've been struck by a Mack truck. Holy mackerel, we thought we were making progress, and all of a sudden we're pulling out and nothing's going to be done. In fact, it's going to be even worse for us afterwards, and we're being blamed for it. And Clinton and Barack designed that. So with Bill Clinton comes tragedy for the empire, and it continues, I'm sad to say, through subsequent presidents, including Barack Obama. Tragedy for the empire. Barack Obama's major tragedy was doing Libya on the advice of Hillary Clinton and Samantha Power. He was very regretful of that. When I met with him in the Roosevelt Room in his last year of his second term, his first words to me were, there's a bias in this town toward war. That's a direct quote. I put that to the head of my syllabus at William & Mary. There's a bias in this town toward war. Barack
He didn't
Obama.
notice that? He didn't know that? Like, what I mean about that
It took him 7 years to figure it out.
That's right. It's like, how did it take him 7 years to figure that out? One of the, God, man, this is going to lead me to Iran for a bit. One of the most interesting things is Wesley Clark. And Wesley Clark pointed out they're going to take down 7 governments, X amount of time frame. Of course, it didn't take the 7 years that they thought. But they did exactly that, regardless of the president that was in office with Iran.
They started the process.